for joining us for this specially scheduled press conference. The month of June has been a busy one for us, and it's also been full of great work. Here from the Special Operations Bureau is Major DJ Johnson, who's going to talk to us about some great work in the areas of de-escalation. Major?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Johnson, and as Lieutenant Fishback mentioned, I'm the Major over the Special Operations Bureau, which includes our SWAT team, which we're going to discuss a little bit today. I'm here to discuss some highly dangerous calls for service that our department has responded to over the last couple of weeks, and to highlight the tremendous work that has been done by our officers to bring every single one of them to a peaceful resolution. The safety of our officers, employees, and the citizens we serve is always of utmost importance to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Our city and our department are very fortunate that we have brave men and women who have answered the call to service and placed themselves in harm's way on a daily basis, and that we have access to a variety of tools and techniques at our disposal to successfully de-escalate dangerous and potentially life-threatening situations. Recently, there have been 4 such incidents that exemplify the great work by our patrol officers, by our SWAT negotiators, and by our SWAT tactical officers. Shortly before 1:45 p.m. on June the 2nd, officers in the Steel Creek Division responded to the 13,500 block of Little Abbey Lane in reference to a domestic disturbance call for service. As officers knocked on the door and announced themselves, a suspect inside the residence discharged multiple rounds, narrowly missing the officers. Officers immediately found positions of cover and began to evacuate surrounding apartments. As officers worked to ensure the safety of those in the immediate area, the suspect continued to discharge additional rounds. When the suspect refused to exit the residence, the SWAT team was requested to assist. After speaking with our negotiators, the suspect peacefully surrendered to SWAT officers shortly after 4 p.m. Amazingly and thankfully, no officers were injured or discharged their service weapons during this incident. On June the 9th, at 7:12 p.m., East Wade Division patrol officers responded to an assault with a deadly weapon call for service at 3333 Magnolia Hill Drive. When officers arrived on scene, the 911 caller told them their neighbor had pointed a handgun at them, had threatened them, and had discharged that weapon in their vicinity. The suspect retreated into their apartment prior to police arrival and refused to come out. Officers from East Wade Division and across the city responded, surrounded the building, and requested SWAT. The situation was peacefully de-escalated after a lengthy negotiation and utilization of SWAT team tactics. Again, the suspect was taken into custody without injuries to anyone involved. On June 10th, at about 11:30 p.m., officers responded to a domestic disturbance call for service at 9400 Split Rail Lane in the Hickory Grove Division. Upon arrival, the officers made contact with 2 victims who advised that the suspect, who was a family member, had assaulted them, had threatened them, and had pointed a firearm at them and shot rounds inside the residence. Patrol officers secured a perimeter around the house, while other investigating officers obtained arrest warrants for the suspect for the assault. The SWAT team responded and took over service of the warrants. The suspect was again successfully talked out of the residence and was taken into custody peacefully. After getting consent to search the house, officers located 4 firearms and additional ammunition. And most recently, on June the 12th, at around 4 a.m., Independence Division officers responded to the 2700 block of Mill Valley Court regarding multiple calls for a disturbance inside a residence where shots were being fired. As officers arrived, they found the front door open. When they knocked on the door and announced themselves, the suspect came down the stairs. As officers asked the suspect to see his hands, the suspect produced a firearm. As the officers found a position of cover, the suspect discharged multiple shots inside the home. Officers established a perimeter, evacuated nearby residences, and requested the SWAT team. SWAT tactical officers and negotiators responded and made multiple attempts at contact with the subject inside. After several hours of attempted negotiations with no response, The SWAT team utilized an array of de-escalation tactics and techniques and tools to disorient this individual, and the suspect was safely apprehended and taken into custody shortly before 11 a.m. No CMPD officers were injured or discharged their service weapons during this incident. Now, after we resolve incidents such as these, we always evaluate the totality of the circumstances to determine the best course of action to serve not only the victims of these cases, but also the suspects. These efforts are taken holistically to address the criminal behavior and to hopefully prevent incidents like this from happening again. This is all in line with our crime management strategy. To do this, CMPD utilizes not only criminal prosecution, but also mental health resources such as our Community Policing Crisis Response Team, or CPCRT, our crisis intervention trained officers, mobile crisis, and other area mental health resources. What this means is, if criminal charges are appropriate, we certainly pursue those. However, if our contact with this person is because they're experiencing a mental health crisis or a substance abuse initiated crisis, then we ensure that we connect the dots to make sure that the proper resources get to them and that they get the help that they need. Now, none of this would be possible without, one, the heroic men and women of this department that put on this uniform every day and uphold the sacred oath that they took to serve this community. I'm thankful for them, and I'm honored to serve alongside them. And two, the commitment by our department and city leaders to provide the necessary life-saving equipment and training that so vastly increases the likelihood of de-escalation and peaceful resolutions to these types of cases and helps us achieve the SWAT team mission of preservation of life. Now, I'll be glad to take any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
Out of the 4 instances that you just cited, how many of these involve mental health resources or were these individuals charged?
We had mental health resources on hand for all of these, and charges were involved in all of them. So yes to both.
You mentioned on the last incident that the SWAT team disoriented the suspect.
Yes.
Was this with the use of flashbangs possibly?
Among other tactics, yes. We generally try to start there, and then we work a designed playbook to escalate things if we don't get a response. But yes, short answer.
Talk about how important these outcomes are when it comes to building trust with the community and showing that de-escalation tactics can be used successfully.
This is really just an example, right, of the work that goes on every day here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Every single day, police officers have encounters with folks that end peacefully. Hundreds of thousands of them a year, in fact, right? So this is really just a sliver of that. De-escalation takes place every single day, every single minute of every hour here in this jurisdiction, and it very rarely gets heard about or talked about. The tools that we have as a tactical team, as our SWAT team, the tools that we have, the specialized tools and training, certainly allow us to minimize an armed face-to-face encounter with someone who's experiencing a crisis, and that drastically increases the likelihood of survivability and that we come to a peaceful resolution. And those tools and tactics are very important for us to be successful. Yes, sir.
And how many of these situations were officers actually fired at?
One of the 4.
The first?
Yes, the first one. Correct.
And how does that change the way they go about a situation?
Well, it's dynamic, right? So officers have to make split-second decisions as to whether they are going to stand their ground and return fire, or if the environment and the conditions are such that they can find cover and try to find another resolution to this. Fortunately, for everybody involved, the officers in this situation were able to find some cover pretty quick. We got those apartments evacuated, and were able to get that gentleman to come safely out of the apartment. But every situation is different, and the officers have to make those very difficult split-second decisions, and we hope that they're able to rely on their training and experience and equipment to be successful in that. Yes, sir.
So the city adopted a new budget yesterday that kind of expanded, financial resources for the mental health crisis team you guys have. Can you talk a little bit about, how you look to improve upon that, going forward?
So that's a different area of the department than mine, but I will tell you this, they are an invaluable resource, and honestly, they are underutilized and underfunded. So we're glad to hear that they're going to receive some increased funding. We're really blazing trails when it comes to partnering with mental health partners, having them in the police car with us, ready to respond at a moment's notice to these types of calls. And I really believe that type of work is where our department and where our profession is headed. And I'm glad to know that our department and our city leaders see the value in that and are leading the charge.
How does that work when officers are called somewhere? How do you make the determination that a mental health specialist is needed, and how do they, go about it?
So we do a full workup. If we know who the individual is, we interview neighbors and family members and gather that information to try to determine if there's a history there. Typically, we're pretty good at that, at finding out who this person is and what their history is, and then we can tailor our response to that.
So is the suspects secured before the mental health person get engaged in? Otherwise, they'd be wearing armor or undercover or something?
Correct. Some of our mental health folks, that particularly our CP, CRT folks, they're issued body armor because they're in the police car and they're responding to these calls. What will happen on a scene of a SWAT call out is those SWAT team negotiators who are specially trained in engaging these folks may have a mental health person nearby, right, to provide them advice or to counsel them. But our negotiators are highly trained at engaging these folks and bringing this to a peaceful resolution. So we're thankful for them, certainly.
Do you think there's been kind of a rise in these kind of incidents recently? Or?
Well, there certainly has been in the month of June. It's picked up. Things get busier during the summertime, and folks are coming out of COVID hibernation, and so things are going to pick up across the city. But we've certainly seen an increase on it, and we're thankful that things have resolved the way that they have.
Can you talk a little bit about the training that goes into being one of these SWAT officers and learning how to get involved in that de-escalation?
It's extensive. So there's a very thorough selection process that these officers go through. Now understand, when we talk SWAT team, we're talking about our tactical officers and our negotiators, our crisis negotiators who are out training today, as a matter of fact. But there's an extensive selection process, weeks and weeks of training. For our tactical officers, sometimes it's a full 6 months or a year before they're forward deployed, on a hot scene like that. But they train on a monthly basis. They train in excess of what the National Tactical Officers Association says is the minimum, right? And we're fortunate that, like I said, our department and our city has funded us to a level and equipped us to a level that we're able to do that training and do it successfully and really lead the region and the nation sometimes in some of our tactics and abilities. All right. Thank you very much.
To our media partners, I know we put a lot of information out to you. Check your inboxes here shortly. We're going to provide a synopsis of everything that we went over. Out of the 4 cases discussed, we had previously sent out media releases on 2 of those cases. If you want those again, hit us up in the PIO inbox, and we'll get those sent out to you again. Okay? Thank you for coming out this afternoon. Out of the 4 cases discussed, we had previously sent out media releases on 2 of those cases.